Now let's talk about New South Wales getting a new gas-powered electricity generator. That means, thanks to the national grid, that electricity supplies are going to be more secure to a degree across all the states, except for WA, of course, which runs its own grid. On one hand, this is good news. We need reliable, dispatchable power. And sadly, the renewables push has forced thousands of megawatts of reliable coal-fired power to close in recent years in South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. So this new plant near Wollongong will have a capacity of 300 megawatts. So it's sizable, but not huge. It'll be operational in about 2 years and therefore will help make up for the early retirement of the Liddell coal-fired power station in the Hunter Valley. And it's going to be configured to run on hydrogen as well as natural gas. So that's a big first, and it's an important kickstart for hydrogen manufacturers in this country as people try to start up that industry. OK, that's all the good news. But there's also an $83 million bill for taxpayers going into this thing. You will be subsidising this power station. Why? Well, because governments, state and federal, have stuck their noses into energy policy over the years because they pretend they can save the planet. So having subsidised all the renewables for the past decade or so, they've made dispatchable power unviable, and now they have to subsidise fossil fuel power, otherwise we run out. What a shambles. And this comes in the week that Victoria announced it will go solo and reduce its emissions by 50% within a decade. So Daniel Andrews and Victoria have gone the full Greta Thunberg, the full Joe Biden, and you will pay. There's going to be lots of consequences to the Victorian decision as they try to deliver on this promise. We'll always focus on them in this program, and one of them will be electric cars. How are they going to ensure that half of all cars sold will be electric within a decade? Remember, this was the promise Labor took to the last federal election. So to discuss this, let's catch up with Stuart Norman, who's the CEO of Parking Australia. Thanks for joining us, Stuart. First up, this is the promise from Daniel Andrews that they'll subsidise zero emissions vehicles, and so half of all cars sold within a decade will be electric cars. That's either going to cost a fortune or it ain't going to happen.
Well, it comes back to people having choice, and people should have choice, as we know what to drive, and I think that was proven at the last federal election when people didn't support the Labor Party with their pledge to have 50% of electric cars. Really, it should come down to the market. People should have choice. People, I don't think, are against electric cars, but they should be on the same platform as pretty much every other type of vehicle.
Well, I think, look, in the ideal world, a lot of people might have one electric car and one internal combustion. Your little car for running around the city that you go to work in each day, maybe you plug that in at home and drive it to work. Maybe that might be useful, as long as the cost is all right. But my point is, why should governments be handing out money hand over fist to try and direct people down that path? Because they're already talking about, what, $3,000 per vehicle to help people out.
Well, this sort of subsidy of initiatives like this goes back into different industries that I've been involved in, and we think about the pink bats that was back in the Rudd government, and we think about the subsidies for household solar. The interesting thing about both of those, and potentially almost for electric vehicle charging, is there wasn't a great deal of risk analysis done on these about when they wanted to roll them out. There wasn't consultation, especially around the pink bats, with the union or the peak body about the risks involved. And we're coming about this from a parking point of view about, well, electric vehicles are going to be in the market. There's going to be electric charging. We think electric charging stations are best placed in car parks. But car parks, for a lot of these, were built in the 70s, and the fire suppression systems were built for internal combustion engines. Now, I would have thought that the role of bureaucrats and politicians, but mainly bureaucrats in this instance, would be to assess the risk. OK, we're going to have electric cars, we're going to have electric charging, but is the infrastructure prepared for that? Do we have the building code? Do we have the standards? What happens if an electric car goes up in flames in a multi-storey car park? Do we know? No, we don't. So while it's nice to promote electric vehicles, there's a lot of other unintended consequences which really have been caught up in the malaise of trying to go green.
Well, it's pretty expensive to put in these charges at home, a few $1,000s, I think. Some people will want to do that and charge up overnight. But do you think there'll be an expectation for car parks to have electric charging stations? I know there's some of them around now, but if you're going to upgrade to that level in Victoria, you'll need lots of them. And would you have to bear that cost, or would you actually make money out of it? You could charge people extra for their car park while they charge up.
Well, this comes back to our point, is that while it's great to promote electric vehicles, how many electric vehicles are we going to have in 10 years' time? How many charging stations do we need? Where do those stations need to be placed for the best outcome? Now, my worry is that, in like a lot of government issues, they'll throw some money at it and it will be not a very efficient way to use taxpayers' money. And I'll give a really simple example, Chris. There'll be councils that will put on-street car charging in timed or paid car spaces. Now, the average car time in a car space is 40 minutes. Well, putting that in for 40 minutes on a single-phase power is really going to be quite negligible, but there will be subsidies, there will be promotion to put these on-street to make it look good, where really we should be looking at putting these into shopping centres, airports and places where people will park all day and leave it up to the market. Yes, building facility owners will go, right, well, there's a market for it, we'll put it in, people will pay for it. But a lot of times when government get involved in a market, it skews it and the money will be not very efficiently used.
Yeah, and the people who are hit with the money are us, always. Thanks for joining us, Stuart. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Stuart Norman, the CEO of Parking Australia. Let the market decide. Yeah, stop shoveling taxpayers and ratepayers' money at this stuff. Let the market work it out. I was in California about 3 years ago now, might be 4, driving around in a thumping big V8, and there were a lot of these electric charging stations in car parks. Never saw an electric car in them. Maybe things have picked up a bit by now.